What's going on? I'm Marcus and you're at the channel of the Debt Free Dad, where we're following my journey to debt freedom and learning about finance. In this video, we are going to talk about 10 rules or things you should take into consideration when engaged in negotiations. And that's for anything, whether you're negotiating with your spouse, a contract for the sale of a home, for the purchase of a vehicle. I could do a whole 20-30 minutes on just negotiation tips and tactics, but we're going to go over the top 10 things from a list that could be 100 items long. Because y'all know I'm an attorney, I'm a licensed attorney, but I'm not your attorney, so if you're looking for legal or financial advice, definitely seek a professional in your local area. But I've been engaged in negotiations as an attorney for well over a decade. I've negotiated criminal cases, I've negotiated civil cases, I've negotiated multi-million-dollar settlements against pharmaceutical companies. I do have a little experience on negotiation strategies and tactics, and been trained and received formalized training to do so. So we'll definitely talk about that. The other thing we're going to dive into is how much we actually listed our rental property for on the market, what factors we use, and how you should remember that when you have a professional, I don't care if it's your attorney, your accountant, your broker, your real estate agent, they work for you, so you make sure you capitalize on that and always doing your due diligence. As always, if you're interested in following my debt-free journey and learning about finance, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and also hit that bell notification so you can get updated when new videos drop. Let's dive in. Well, now that we're at the table, let's go ahead and talk about it. First, we're going to talk about the negotiations. But I'm just going to kind of give 10 of the, I guess what I would like to call some of the basic concepts to effective negotiation. Now, this works in all aspects. I don't care if you're negotiating for a car, for a house, if you're negotiating with your husband or your wife. That being said, my negotiation track record with my wife is probably the only losing track record that I have. Well, not losing, but I probably don't win most of those, but that's another story. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Number 10 is it's combative, but it's not combative. So one thing that you want to do when you're going into any negotiation, I don't care if you're calling a creditor that you owe and you're trying to negotiate a lower balance, don't go in with a combative mindset. Internally, hey, it's you against them, but you definitely don't want to show that type of attitude. Some people, if that's your mentality, it may resonate through your behavioral pattern, so you may talk aggressive. So just kind of keep an eye on that. You want to go in cool, calm, and collective. Number 9 is you have to understand. Here they go with the fireworks. Well, yesterday was the 4th, so I give them a pass. But you have to understand the needs and wants of the other party. A lot of times, to be successful in any negotiation, you have to understand what the other party wants, what they value. A good way to do this is really by doing open source research. So if you're talking about properties, that's when you do your comparisons and you're looking at your comparable homes. Negotiations with, let's say, a creditor, for example. Well, that could depend. If you're actually negotiating with the first creditor, so you borrowed money on a credit card, you haven't paid that credit card, is in collections, and you're still negotiating with the credit card company, then what their bottom line is going to be different versus if that creditor perhaps sold it to a third party. If you're talking to a third party, now you know you got a lot more leverage because they probably bought that debt from the initial creditor for pennies on the dollar. Okay, the next thing you have to understand, and this is a big one, this kind of goes with being combative. Well, not combative, but just you can't go in wild and out, is you can't lie. If you lie in negotiations, anybody who does their due diligence will find out. In the legal world, there is a term called puffery, which is allowed. So lying is telling a fact, making up a fact that is or isn't present. Puffery is essentially embellishing on the fact. I got my house listed for sale. Let's say I wanted to sell it for $100,000, just as an example. I had 2 offers come in, both below the asking price. Now I got a third offer that came in, and it's $5,000 above the asking price. Puffery would be saying that, well, we do have multiple offers that came in that were very strong offers and very aggressive offers in line with the asking price of the property. Hey, that sounds like, man, we got people who probably bid already, who went above and beyond the asking price. Is it the truth? Isn't that the truth? But it's not necessarily a lie either. So understand that lying is bad, but puffery of certain facts is allowed. So definitely take advantage if you can do it and do it well and not make yourself look like a goofy. The next thing you have to do is identify your strengths. And even if you don't think you have a strength, you actually have a strength. If I'm selling a property and I'm selling it because I'm underwater financially or I'm over leveraged in debt, now I have to understand, hey, that's not necessarily a position of strength. But understanding the position of strength I have could be, hey, I do have this property. I am in a market that's around schools, a lot of hospitals. So I do have some leverage, even though I'm over leveraged in debt, so I need to get rid of this property. I do have some leverage in that this is a great community, it's an up and coming community. It's a community that a lot of individuals are looking for single family homes. So those are some of the things that you can use. You have a bill that's in collections and you sitting there thinking like, I mean, just on its face, you're not coming from a position of strength because you owe them money. You haven't paid anything on it. But actually, you are coming from a position of strength because when you're actually engaged in the negotiations, you can really stress the point and use your leverage that, hey, it's in your best interest to actually work with me because this is in collections and it's going to cost you more to actually retain an attorney to go through and file a lawsuit to collect this $4,000. So let's work something out that's amicable in the meeting of the minds for the both of us. You have to think outside the box. Sometimes when you aren't at a position of advantage on its face, if you actually think about it, you still have some leverage that you can use on your side to help in your negotiations. All right, number 6 is a big one. It could have been number 1, but you have to listen more than you talk. If you engage in any negotiations and you actually just sit down to listen what the other party is saying, that's your opportunity to find out what they value. And if you go into a negotiation and you're doing most of the talking, it's probably not going to end out well in your favor, or the other party may look at you as being kind of a jerk. So always give the other party time to talk. I mean, I think that's always the best way to do it. And plus, when you let people talk and they have a longer opportunity to talk, they get the feeling that you are really considering and are more considerate of what they value with regard to the negotiation, and that can go a long way as well. You could honestly not give a damn, but if you actually let people talk and sit back and listen more than you talk during the negotiation, it'll work out in your favor. The next thing is that there necessarily doesn't have to be winners and losers in negotiations. Sometimes there are definite winners and losers in negotiations, but I've been involved in negotiations where I've gotten exactly what I wanted and the other party got damn near exactly what they wanted, and the only thing was getting to that point where we were comfortable truly disclosing what each side truly was comfortable disclosing what they wanted. And once we kind of got to that point, we realized that, hey, we definitely weren't far off, even though when you start, you always start far off, but where our bottom line was, it definitely wasn't far off from what each party had in mind. This is just a personal preference for me. Some people say never do this. I always do it. I always make the first offer because I like setting the terms of the negotiation. So most times I like to make the first offer because I like to set the terms, and typically I prefer to negotiate from a point of excess. So what that means is that, and that can be depending on the situation. If I'm selling a home and my house is valued at $100,000, I think it's worth $100,000, my first offer to list the property is probably going to be above $100,000. I think I said $1,000, but it'll probably be over $100,000. The reason being is that offer that's on that Zillow or homes.com or whatever the website is, that's really your first offer that you're putting out there. Even though technically the other party is giving you an offer and it's up to you to accept it, but that listing price is really your first offer, so to speak. So I always offer from a point of access. And just think about it. If the house is $100,000, I list it at $120,000 because I think it's a strong market. what would I look like saying, oh, let's list it at $105,000? It's a lot easier to come down from your listing point or your original position as opposed to trying to go up. Like you can't negotiate up when you're trying to make money. It doesn't work that way. It's kind of, I mean, you probably could, but I've never seen it done that way. It probably is possible, but that's just kind of my position. And it works in the inverse. If I owe a creditor and I'm calling to negotiate with this creditor, if the balance is $4,000, I'm not going to call and be like, hey, I got, what I can give you is $2,500 because that's what I got saved. No, I'm going to start at something lower. Hey, I got $1,000 that I could give you, and I can give it to you today, and then you kind of work your way up. You see what they're willing to capitulate on, but never start at what your bottom line point is the real takeaway from that. All right. The next one is, and this kind of goes back to lying and puffery, act in good faith. People know when you BSing. I was about to cuss, but people know when you BSing. I give you a prime example. We were looking at a home once. It was one of those split level houses. And so when you come in, there's a stair that goes downstairs and the stairs that go upstairs. Well, the downstairs was huge because it was the same square footage as the upstairs was. And it looked like at one point it was just maybe 2 rooms and a huge kind of basement lounge area on that lower level. Well, at some point they initially went through and they made 4 bedrooms down there. So it went from 2 to 4, and it was still a huge lounge area to include a laundry room. Well, where things got interesting is because, I mean, again, I do my research, so not everything that looks like a bedroom is considered a bedroom, for one. And the other thing is, if you purchase a home where the work wasn't done in accordance with local permits, it could potentially be problematic for you. And so let me explain what will happen. Let's say they had this place listed as a 6-bedroom. It was really only 3 bedrooms, as an example, but they had it listed as a 6-bedroom. So I actually asked, I was like, hey, can you give me the paperwork or anything to show that this work for these additional rooms that were added were done in accordance with local codes and ordinances? And they couldn't give me anything. And, you know, but it's not that they couldn't give me anything. They tried to give me something that was bullcrap. I would actually much rather them have said, hey, look, it wasn't done with permits and it wasn't done with permits, but it was done in line with the ordinances and the local rules. That's the only thing we can tell you. But if they would have told me that up front, I would have probably said, okay, and my offer would have reflected more in line with this 6-bedroom that they had listed. I just didn't like how they were negotiating. All right, the next one is emotions are involved, but don't get emotional. You can't take things personal, even if you're looking for your dream or forever home, which doesn't exist, by the way. The average person stays in their home for 5 to 7 years. That's on average, so there's no such thing as your forever home. If you go in with that mindset that, hey, this is just a house, we can always find another one that we'll like, you're in a much better position just from an emotional standpoint that, hey, you're willing to walk away. And the last thing is, and this is really big, this is right up there with listening, it probably should have been, yeah, I think this is number 1. Understand your max, your minimum, and your plan B. I'll talk a little bit about that when I jump into, well, no, since it's the last one, I'm about to jump into it. Let's go ahead and dive in. The max, minimum, and plan B. My max I'm willing to take is this. The minimum I'm willing to take is this, and my plan B is, hey, I'm willing, if this deal completely falls apart, just go back to the drawing board and see if I can find another buyer or somebody who has an interest more in line with what I want. You have to be able to have all of those things play out. If you don't have what your bottom line you're willing to accept is and what the max and the minimum is, you're going into, that's like going into a gunfight with a slingshot. You're gonna get your ass kicked. So that's kind of how it goes. Now that we talked about the negotiations, let's go ahead and talk about what we listed our property for. Now, I'm not going to talk about how much we owe on the property because you can go back to my net worth video or some other video where I talked about the property and found all of that out. This is kind of where we landed, and this is how we decided on what we were going to list the property for. Initially, as you all know, we were initially going to make repairs to the property. So this is one of the benefits from actually living in that house. We actually knew some of the neighbors and who recently sold their home. So we knew exactly because they've been in contact with us, or we could have just looked it up. But they told us what they sold their homes for. So at one point we had a neighbor who had a 2-bedroom place that was a little bit smaller than ours, sold hers as is for about $150,000, and that was somewhere between $10,000 to $12,000 over what her asking price was. So when we first thought about it, we thought, hey, well, ours is a 3-bedroom and it's an end unit that has its own privacy fence. So for townhome purposes, off the cuff, that's going to add a lot more value, having an additional room and being that end unit, because you have more of an actual backyard. Like I said, we had a basketball court in the backyard and a grill and the whole nine. And so that was number one. We looked at the comps in the areas, and we were actually able to get feedback from some of our friends we knew in the area about what they sold their property for and kind of how their process went along. But even if you didn't have friends, you can find what comps sold for just from doing some open source research. The next thing that we had that worked in our favor, hey, I did a video about it. When we refinance, one of the conditions of doing the refinance is actually getting appraisal of the property. Now, appraisal is like, I don't know who eats avocados or guacamole, but appraisals are like guacamole. They only good for the day. They literally only good for the day. Like, it sounds crazy, but I'm literally 100% facts. They're only good for the day. So we got an appraisal done late last year prior to getting the refinance done. Once we got that appraisal done, the house appraised for about $154,000. So now you're taking into consideration that it's 6 months down the road. Now, like I said, initially we were going to make the repairs. I already got the estimates for the repairs, so we were talking about maybe $7,000. So we're talking about $54,000 plus $7,000. So what we were initially going to do was going to list the property for about $166,000. But after the evaluation, after I didn't really want to deal with the time and effort to coordinate all the repairs and everything, I didn't even want to waste the capital at that point to repair it, because that's money that's set aside that we could take and use for something else. We decided, hey, let's go ahead and sell this property as is. Once we came up with the decision to sell the property as is, what we did was we went back down a little bit over what that original estimate was, but we were in a strong position and are in a strong position because we know the market is hot. So the house appraised for $154 about 6 to 7 months ago. We were going to originally list it at about $166, but because we didn't want to make the repairs that were about $7,000 to $8,000, we said, hey, let's list the property at $157, because in this market we know that we can demand a much higher price and just kind of let the bidding war play out. Now, if we weren't in this market, there's no way I would have listed it for that price. If we weren't in this market, I probably would have actually made the repairs so I can maximize the return. But considering this is a seller's market, I was like, hey, no need to make the repairs. Let's list it at this price. Let's go ahead and start the bidding war. So that's kind of how we got the property listed at $157,000. Now, just one quick message with regard to when you're working with your realtor. I'm a tough person to work with, especially when it comes to business transactions, because when you're buying a house, whether it's your primary residence or your rental property, investment property, whatever it is, for most people, purchasing a home is the biggest investment they're going to ever make. So I take my coin seriously. I don't have time for a realtor who's not really aggressive and looking for my and making sure that my interest is served. That's just kind of how I work. When you're my realtor, you work for me. It is what it is. That's just kind of it. The same way if I'm your lawyer, hey, I work for you. You let me know how you want to proceed. I can give you options. I can tell you that's dumb as hell. You probably shouldn't testify. I can do all of that, but at the end of the day, hey, I work for you. And it works the same way. So you have to have someone who you actually trust to get the job done. That's number one. And two, don't be afraid to tell your realtor or whoever it is who works for you, this is what I want, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I'm willing to capitulate. All of the prices and everything, the 157, what we listed it at, those were my numbers based on my research. Now, I'm sure those numbers were in line with the numbers that were provided by the realtor based on her open source research, but I'm just the type of person that is, hey, for things that I know I can do the research to find and do, I'm going to do. And for those things that I know I need to defer to a subject matter expert, that's where I will defer to a subject matter expert. But remember, people work for you, make them work for you. That's really all we got. Hey, I appreciate you all tuning in. Appreciate y'all. Y'all take care. Be blessed. Love y'all. Peace. Right now, if you're tuning in, there should be some videos that's up on the screen. Take a look at those videos. Definitely some more content you'll enjoy and follow my debt-free journey and learning about finance. And while you're at it, if you aren't subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe link right there on the screen to your right.